At this time, 5:35, I'd like to call each of you who have come. I would like to remind us all of how critically important this particular workshop is to the ongoing work of building upon the foundation which has been set for a great school district. Some may look at test scores and decide that they are a necessary evil, while others will see it as an essential good. But wherever we stand, standardized testing is a part of the educational landscape. And the more we are attuned to them, the more we understand the process, the better able we are to make critical decisions that will determine the healthy future of this district. We have the agenda before us, but just prior to the adoption of the agenda in my usual manner, I would ask that we pause for meditative thought. May we pause at this time. Would you join me now in the pledge of the allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, my friends. The meeting is open. The agenda is before you. If there are no objections, the agenda will stand approved. Objections once, twice, 3 times. The agenda is approved. All right. Our workshop tonight is designed to empower board members so that we might better understand testing and the scoring system. It is indeed a session to empower us on how to read the test scores. 4 members of this board if I'm correct, are educators. The others of us are not. And if we are going to be united in our efforts to work with this administration and with this community to improve test scores, we certainly need to know how to read test scores. And so this is not a data workshop. It's a how-to workshop. And I'll ask now the vice chair of the committee and of the board, who was chair of the committee I appointed, to make an opening statement before the staff begins.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here. If you don't mind, I am going to stand. I don't know if I'm going to make an opening statement, but I'm going to jump into this. First of all, our vision and mission statement reminds us that the most important thing is education. That is learning. We're committed to educating. I'm just going to point out the relevant words. We are committed to students and want to help them reach their full potential. We are committed to providing a high quality educational environment that equips them for local global success. All right, we are committed to do that. So, let's do it. But the question is, how did we get to high stakes testing? I'm going to be a little bit like a teacher here. Who in here graduated before 1985? It's okay. Standards weren't developed then. And my guess is, unless you went to school in some strange school, you didn't have state testing that came back and labeled your school. I don't care what state you lived in. It didn't happen. So let's go back just a minute. How did we get to high stakes testing? Well, first of all, there were a few court cases that sort of laid the foundation. If you've ever heard of Plessy versus Ferguson, or Briggs versus Elliott, or Brown versus Board of Education, absolutely laid that groundwork. In fact, the Supreme Court did that. Then we have two things called Congress, and we also have U.S. Department of Education. And it just so happens in 1965, there was a person called President Johnson, and he was influential in getting the ESEA passed, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Now that was really a civil rights federal regulation as we look back. And then in 2002, anybody remember that? That's within your memory bank. Who was president? Obama, President Obama. And they, not in 2002, excuse me, I'm jumping ahead. Was it Obama? Who was it?
Bush.
Yes, Bush, excuse me, I'm jumping ahead. And so, that was just to see if you were awake. That was the No Child Left Behind Act. Now that thing was crazy. I was teaching at that time, and I remember we would go to workshops, and they would tell us that in 10 years, everybody would be proficient. And I'm thinking, oh, please, these people don't know education. That's a grand idea. Well, anyway, it really was unworkable. But that was the federal act that created standard-based education and created high standards with measurable goals. That's where it started, besides all of the legal work. And then in 2015, who was the president? Okay, and they passed Every Child Succeeds Act. That, and I'll ask Dr. McLeod for an affirmative, that is that is something you have to know every day, don't you?
Yes, ma'am.
That really rules education, public education now. So that's where we are. We now have, and I did put in, those of you on the board, you can access what I've just been saying. It's one of those folders for you. All right, so that takes us to test. And so, unless there's something else I can say, if you'll take over, and if I want to jump in, we've made that agreement. If she wants me to shut up, I will. And if there's something that's burning in my heart, we can work it out.
Well, good evening, Chairman Canty, Vice Chairman, Chair Lady, Ms. Disney, Superintendent Dr. Wright, and distinguished members of the board. We are happy to be here tonight. I'm Jada McLeod. I'm the Executive Director of Academics for Sumter School District. With me, I have Dr. Lamont Moore, who is the Director of Testing and Accountability, and that goes all year round these days. And, you know, when he has a spare moment, he also is coordinator at this time for gifted and talented and multilingual learners. Before we move on, I would like to also introduce the rest of my team that will be assisting with the content areas. I have Dr. Emily Kempton. She is our coordinator for K-12 English Language Arts, World Languages, and AVID. Christine Carnes is the Elementary English Language Arts Specialist. She's also the point of contact for all our letters training, Mastery Connect, and the NWEA formative assessments. I have Miss Monica Pate. She's the Elementary Mathematics Specialist, Instructional and Math Coach Trainer, and she leads the point of contact for our teaching and learning framework that we have the draft of now. In addition, I have Mr. Richard Phillips. He's the coordinator of science, STEM, social studies, fine arts, PE, health, and he also helps to grant write too. I will be presenting tonight for Dr. David Laws. He is our director of CTE textbooks, the Sumter School District Virtual Academy, and he is also director of instructional technology. And I'll present for Ms. Carla King, coordinator of mathematics, K-12, and South Carolina virtual learning, our APEC system, homeschool, and our Gear Up grant. Before I begin, that is our content people for our 900 plus teachers. These are the content people that we have at the district level supporting them. We also have tonight one of our newest members of our team of academics, and that's Ms. Pam Rhodes, who is our federal programs director, and she has come in with both feet in the water immediately, and we're so glad to have her with us on our team. Before I begin, Dr. Laws and Ms. King had prior commitments, and they send their apologies, but before we get into the testing and how these tests work and those types of things, I wanted to begin by respectfully requesting that this not be a one and done workshop. There are a lot of intricacies and a lot of things that go into the accountability and the testing that is required for public schools. And in upcoming days, I'd like to have dialogue about several things, such as the upcoming school identification method that we're currently under. We're about to transition to an entirely new cycle of accountability, which is very different than this cycle that we've been on since 2018, along with being able to share our new college and career tracking progress, to be able to monitor our students to ensure they all graduate and have either the college or career readiness. In addition, curriculum and the resources available for the teachers. We'd like to be able to show you where it's at, how it's organized, some of the assessments that are aligned to our state standards. And then in the very near future, the fall updates for our most current testing, such as we just received the 2023 fall EOC scores. So those would be some things that I'd be very interested in us having dialogue about, so that we can continue to have the discussions about the continuous growth and moving the needle for student achievement. Can you pull up the presentation for them? And we will ad-lib some to make sure that we are addressing the board's request. But one of the things I wanted to note right here is that, just as Ms. Disney alluded to, the work that we do goes back to, can you go to the next slide?
Dr. McLeod, I forgot to mention what South Carolina did. 1998,
Yeah, absolutely.
former Governor Riley. That's still active.
It definitely is. Yeah, so we'll touch on that also. All of the work that the Office of Academics is part of engages the vision and the mission of Sumter School District. And I think that's really important that we always keep that in mind, along with our newly adopted strategic plan, so that everything that we are doing is focused, and it's focused on that vision and mission, which is to teach our students. So as we begin the actual presentation, I'll ask Dr. Moore to begin. Is this where, somewhere in here we want to show them how to get to the actual report cards electronically.
Absolutely. So good evening, everyone, once again. Just very quickly, thank you for this opportunity just to have open dialogue about student testing and scores and how they impact learning here in our district. We have three very straightforward goals for today's workshop. We want to provide you with a general overview of the state testing program. And in that overview, we want to provide you with the vision and mission of the South Carolina Department of Education. So thank you, Ms. Disney, for giving us that federal history. We're going to pick it up where you left off and talk about how it affects our state and then how it trickles into our district. And we want to talk about how the state testing program supports the vision and mission of the South Carolina Department of Ed. Our second goal is we want to respond specifically to the Sumter School District Board's test score request. You guys gave us specific items that you wanted us to speak to, and we will address those. And then lastly, we want to take the opportunity to provide you with details regarding the instructional strategies and supports that we have in place for our schools. So the great team that we have behind us will be joining us to talk about their different perspectives and how they're supporting schools and principals.
May I interject just a moment? Because this is a workshop, I take it we can be informal.
Yes.
And the other thing, we really want our board members to know how to find these scores, how to read them. For example, what is South Carolina Ready? What is, what does exceeds expectations mean? All of that. So as you're talking, would you just
Yes,
go down
ma'am.
for us?
Absolutely. So just the overview of the state testing program, and the next slide will show you South Carolina Department of Ed's vision and mission statement for all public schools in South Carolina. And they are centering it around preparing students to be successful in college, careers, and citizenship. They have charged school districts to fully embrace this profile of a South Carolina graduate and align every effort in districts to ensure that every student exemplifies the profile. So this profile was created in 2012 by Transform SC, which was a collaboration group that they pulled together that included business leaders, educators, students, parents, and of course policymakers. So this profile focuses on 3 areas, as you can see from the graphic. All instruction, the model of learning in South Carolina, should include world-class knowledge, and underneath you'll see the tenets that pertain to world-class knowledge. It should also include real-world skills and life and career characteristics. So in order to understand how the testing program supports students, you have to understand this profile, because everything is aligned to the profile of the South Carolina graduate. The Education Oversight Committee also created an accountability manual, and you guys should have received a copy of that in your binders. But that manual basically outlines the accountability measures that are placed on schools. And so between those 2 guides, this is where our state testing program falls into place. And so the next few slides, I'm going to take you through what those tests are, what grade levels they assess, what the names are, the subject areas, and what those readiness indicators are. So as you can see on this first slide, the South Carolina Ready Assessment. This is just South Carolina's version of an assessment that will determine if a student is ready, college or career ready, or on track for that. So the subject areas are English Language Arts, mathematics, and science. And it's important to note that science is only assessed for grades 4 and 6. So every other grade level is assessed 3 through 8 in English Language Arts, or ELA, and mathematics. In previous years, and as we're going through data charts, you'll see that for science, the test that we used was called the South Carolina Palmetto Assessment of State Standards, or South Carolina PASS.
And I will say, in one of the materials I gave to the board members, I said South Carolina Pass, but that disappeared, what, last year?
No, well,
It's going this year.
it's going away this year, so you're fine, you're fine. Spring 2023, it will no longer be called South Carolina PASS, it will be called South Carolina Ready Science.
Okay.
And so in order for a student to show that they are on track for readiness, they have to score a level 3, which means that they meet the state standard. Level 3 is meet. Level 4 means they have exceeded. So you'll see level 3 or 4. If they score in those levels, they're considered proficient, which means that they're considered passing or meeting the state standards. Grades 9 through 12, we have South Carolina Ready High School. And formerly that was known as South Carolina End of Course. So you may hear SCEOC, the EOC exam. And in spring 2023, that term will no longer be used. We will call it South Carolina Ready High School. And it tests in Algebra 1, which includes some 8th graders. If you have 8th graders that are showing readiness to take those advanced honors classes in middle school, we include their information. Also English 2, Biology 1, and U.S. History and Constitution. The thing that you need to remember about this data, because it tests grades 9 through 12, it's not a year-by-year data sampling. It is a 4-year composite score. So when you look at those data reports, it's looking at for a 4-year span as opposed to every year. In order for a student to show that they are ready or on track for college and career readiness, they have to score a C or higher on these assessments.
And will they still count 20% of their test grade, no matter what they made in the class?
It's still 20% of their overall grade.
Right.
That's correct.
And is it sometimes weird if they have passed the class but can't pass the state test?
It happens.
It happens.
Yeah, it does.
And a lot of it does go back to test-taking skills, which we work on also. And some students know that that's such a heavy weighting on that test. I'm sure there's somebody in here that the first time they tried to take their driver's license, they didn't pass it because they were so nervous. It's that type of thing for some of our students. They know the weighting is very heavy for whether or not they're going to pass the course overall.
Thank you.
All right. Next slide. So we have advanced classes at Sumter High School, advanced placement and international baccalaureate. So you'll see AP and IB. And those exams are also indicators for whether or not a student is on track for college or career readiness. Students who score a 3 or higher on an AP exam and a 4 or higher on an IB exam are on track to show us that they are college or career readiness, and so, or college and career ready. And that can, students in grades 9 through 12 can take those assessments if they're enrolled in those classes. Our college entrance examinations, the American College Testing, or ACT, or the Scholastic Assessment Test, or SAT. These are our college entrance examinations. They also are used for 11th and 12th graders to indicate whether or not they're college and career ready. They are given in English, mathematics, and the ACT offers a science component as well. Students show that they are ready, college or career ready, if they score a 20 or higher on an ACT, or a 1020 or higher on the SAT. And there are some differences with the tests, but students have to be offered the opportunity to take one of these tests, and students can choose which one they take. For those students who may want to go into the military, we have the Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery, or ASVAB. You may have heard that acronym. This test will measure whether or not a student is, it really predicts whether or not they will do well academically or occupationally in the military. And they must score a 31 or higher on this assessment to be considered college or career, or in this case, military ready. And that's for grades 11 and 12. Students in grades 11 and 12 also take the Career Readiness Assessment, and the State Career Readiness Assessment has changed over the years. It's vacillated between the ACT Work Keys and WIN. And we did not take a State Career Readiness Assessment in the fall of this school year because it changed from ACT Work Keys back to WIN. And so students in the spring of 2023 will have the opportunity to take the WIN assessment. Normally, these students have 2 opportunities to take this career readiness assessment. They take it as 11th graders, and if they do not show that they are career or college or career ready, they can take it as 12th graders. And so this coming spring, we will have 11th and 12th graders to take this assessment. In order for the students to be considered college or career ready, they must score a silver, gold, or platinum on the ACT Work Keys, which was in 2022, or a level 3 or higher on the WIN assessment, which will be given in spring 2023. So there's some complexities here because we did change assessments mid-year, and the State Department has provided guidance on that. So if they took the test in 2022, they took the ACT Work Keys. If they earned silver, gold, or platinum, then they're considered career ready. If they take it this coming spring and they score a level 3 or higher, then they are considered career ready.
Is that mandatory to take it? Is this mandatory for them to take it, or is it?
Yes. Yes, this one is mandatory.
And let me ask you about that work keys. In the day when I was at Sumter High, and in the media center, we had a program where they could go and practice work keys. Now, does the WIN have the same opportunity? Do students have the same opportunity to prepare, maybe go to the media center and take practice tests?
Yes.
They do. And they don't have to go to the media center now that they have Chromebooks. Every student has a Chromebook. We also have ACT Prep and SAT Prep that is available to our students.
All right, so that just gave you an overview of the testing program and the different assessments that we use to determine if students are college or career or military ready. The next portion of this workshop, we're going to talk specifically about your requests. And on the screen, you see the different items that were a part of your request. I've highlighted numbers 3 and 4. Because of the amount of information required in numbers, items 3 and 4, that information is included in your notebooks. So you requested report cards for every school, elementary, middle, and high, and so you should have copies of every report card, and all of the end-of-course testing scores for the high schools will be in the high school report cards.
And this might be a good place to stop to take them.
Yes. So we can take a pause right here, and I can actually, Ms. Scott, if you don't mind, I can get on your laptop and show everyone how to access this electronically, because you have hard copies, but we can show you electronically.
Now, will you be going to the state website?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Do you have hard copies?
Okay, so I'm going to go to the State Department of Education's website, which is ed.sc.gov. And when you get there, you see a lot of different tabs here. I'm going to go to Data and Reports.
I'm going to say something. I was able to find the scores almost on any one of those.
Yes, there are multiple ways to get
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So if you hit the wrong one, you can still find the scores.
Yes, so they've made it user-friendly, so there's multiple ways to get there. Once you're here, Data and Reports, you'll see the icon with the lovely children there with report cards. This takes you to school and state level report cards. So you just click there. You have No Child Left Behind, which is what we referred to earlier. And then South Carolina School report cards will be on your left. Once you click that bullet, it'll take you to another page with an external link. Now, usually what I do once I get the external link, I just save that link in my favorites. So I'm going to click here again. And then you could save this. You can bookmark this so that you go directly here. But from the State Department website, you can just go there, or you can just click this website in, screportcards.com. This gives you different options. You can view a report card, you can compare school districts, you can compare schools, or if you want to just look at the data itself, you can download it. Now, this only gives you 2018 through 2022. As you know, we did have report cards prior to that, and I can show you the link that will take you even further back if you want to go even further back to 2018. So for this purpose, we're just going to go to View Report Card. It's going to ask you the year. Remember, it goes all the way back to 2018. We're just going to pull 2022. This is the last school year. We want to look at the district report card, but if you wanted to look at an individual school, you can just decide if it's a high school, a middle school, elementary, or primary. So we do have primary schools here, and they have report cards as well. You can choose that. So we're just going to do our district report card, and there is a state report card as well.
But just to reiterate, they're tested 3 through 8. So the kindergarten, first grade, that's interesting. But if you're looking for test scores,
That's correct.
So on those primary schools, you will have some test data, like the kindergarten readiness assessment, the pre-K for our early children. You'll have their test score data as well. So once you choose, of course, here are all the districts in South Carolina. If you wanted to, you can look at any of them. This is public information. You're going to choose Sumter School District and then View Report Card. So it's going to pull up the information as it says for the last school year. And as you can see, the different components of the report card are here. So this is how you get there. Of course, each one of these categories will reveal different pieces of what this report card says about our district, even down to the school climate surveys, classroom environment, and the financial data. So that's just very quickly how to get there.
can you go into academic achievement for a moment?
Yes, ma'am. So academic achievement, This is where it's gonna pull from South Carolina Ready, English Language Arts, and math. So that academic achievement is only looking at South Carolina Ready and, of course, in English and math. So you'll see the comparisons here.
Can you show them from here how to get to an individual school? Let's say, for example, my kid went to XYZ. That's what I'm interested in.
Okay.
If I'm going to move here and that's where we're going to live,
So we'll go back to the beginning, and you have those different options. Remember, we went into the view report card option. You could go there again. This time you're not going to choose district, you're going to choose a school. Let's say you wanted to go to Oakland Primary, for example. So you're going to choose primary school, Sumter School District, and then there's Oakland Primary. View report card. Now what you see is not the district report card, but the information for that particular school. And you can do this for any of our schools. You can click through academic achievement, and as you can see, they don't have state data.
That's because they're all elementary.
Yes, this is a primary, so they don't have third grade. But when in the preparing success, you have information for how they did on the kindergarten readiness assessment and how it compares to the district and state.
Show us a school where you got all of it. Yes.
So let's try to the middle school. First one that comes up. And so now you'll see it look very different. You have the overall rating and score for the school.
yeah, explain to them the levels a school can be. Average, there are
They're right there.
4 levels?
Yes. And so right here, they have, there's different levels. Excellent, and gives you a little description for excellent. Good, average, below average, or unsatisfactory. And then here are the point ranges. So each part of this report card there's a formula that's attached to it, and schools earn points based on how they perform. Based on where those points, those ratings fall, schools are scored, and it falls in one of the ranges for the actual designation for the school. And so here's everything that kind of breaks that down for you. And then, of course, at the very top, it'll show Abstract Middle School earned 47 points average. And then you have each of the areas rated as well.
And if you click on that, that's where
Academic achievement?
we're going to see the numbers, right?
Yes. And so now you can see for this particular category, there's a possible 35 points. This is how many they earned in that category. And you also see, like we did before, how the school performed as it was the district and the state. You see the percentages here. And you also see the number of students that actually scored in that percentage.
But take us to the page where you have the breakdown of the 6th grade,
That's in the
7th
detail.
grade, 8th grade.
You
So
just
if you
click on them.
details,
And
you
I
can see
think,
these.
yeah, I think that's what we wanted to know.
Okay. And so you'll see where all of the levels, remember we talked about meets and exceeds. That means they met the standard, but there are other levels as well. And then there's some students that are not tested. You see that for ELA and math. And then if you scroll down, you'll see the grade level breakdowns. This is the percent that passed the test, met or exceeded the state standards for ELA and math.
There's another page where you have all, they're lined up, 6, 7, and 8, and you can see whether or not they've done better the next year. I mean, are the kids getting better as the more grades they go? I'm not sure how you found that page, how you found that page, but I think that's what our group wants to see.
So if you wanted to compare how the school did to how they did the previous year.
No, individual grades in that school.
I think you're talking about, I think I know what you're talking about, the SE Pass, but that was a different website.
No.
'Cause I got that one.
So for this one, it'll only show you for that academic year.
Right.
You would have to pull up like in another window.
It's
you'd have
under
to pull
test,
up.
I think. For example, South Carolina Ready.
Mhm.
Just the test South Carolina Ready. Not in mathematics, but,
So are you asking, you want to see just a specific subject area?
yes.
So this one will show you by grade level. English language arts, for example, is the subject area, and this is the amount that is proficient on the assessment. And then here's math for those grade levels. Now, if you want to do comparisons to prior years, I would suggest pulling up the prior year report card.
It's this one,
It's that one.
yeah. It's a different part of the website.
Yes, yes.
Not, you know, I'm talking, it's this one she's talking about.
Yes.
That part of the website, where it says the
Okay.
SE Ready test order.
That's a different website
Yeah,
on the state
yeah.
part.
Right.
So I could show you that as well. You want to look at that now?
Right, and show them how you get there.
Before you do that, can I ask a question? Is that directly related to score? But looking at the grade of the school, we saw a school in our district that was average. Do we have a school in our district that is excellent?
No,
No.
no, sir.
Well, do we have one that's good?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
How many do they have?
I would need to count. But yes, we do.
We have two,
I can get that information.
Dr.
It doesn't
McLeod's,
have to be in there.
right, Dr. McLeod's trying to answer it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
we currently have two that are rated good for the 21-22 school year, and then two middle schools for 21-22 school year.
Dr. McLeod, I'm not hearing is not the best. Can you try it one more time?
I'm sorry. We currently have two elementary schools with that rating,
With the good,
yes,
okay?
very close to excellent. And then two middle schools that have the good rating.
Of note too, the school that we just showed is average, but it's a 47.
Yes,
Which is
very-
the highest average score you can have. So
Right.
we got another one that's borderline.
So if the 47 was a 50, it would then be another
48.
48? Okay.
Yeah. We have quite a few schools that fall on the cusp of the next.
Yes, sir.
So yes, you can see that score. Sorry. You can see 48 is good, 47 is the top of the average.
I got you. I got you. Good answer.
All right. So that's, in a nutshell, how to access the school and district report cards. We have a different question, or you guys want me to dig into anything else while we're here?
If you can go back and show them where to find the actual assessment. I believe it's in reports.
You can also,
It's in reports.
you can also Google the year and SE Ready test score, you know, pop up.
I think it's in most of those anyway. They're put in different little cubby holes.
There it is.
So, let me go back. So basically, I went to data reports, like we started. This time, instead of going into report cards, I'm going into test scores.
There we go, and then you go to South Carolina Ready, or whichever one you want. H-South is an old one.
Very old.
They keep it there, they'll go from there.
So we can real quick in the South Carolina Ready, and of course, you see the
22,
dates here.
22.
2022, you can choose, of course, our district.
expectations means approaches, meets, exceeds. I can give you my experience with them. When I worked for the State Department of Education, and they sent us to schools we worked with, we were, exceeds is excellent, meets expectation, excellent, but we were excited about the approaches because we felt like if we just put extra effort with those children, we could bump that up. So,
Absolutely.
right.
So for this section, they break the scores into what we call quartiles. So you have almost into fours. Does not meet or is the bottom 25% of the scores. And this is the percentage of students that fall in that bottom 25%. Approaches is that next 25%. Meets, that means they've scored above the 50th percentile. And exceeds is that top 25%.
And I watch, it looks horrible when you see a third grade does not meet expectations. However, for board members, I put the standards for third grade ELA in your packet. I guess it's on in your webpage. But also, I gave you an example of a released question for third grade. It is difficult. And if the child can't read in third grade, cannot do well.
But I also compared it to the other districts too. So
I
it's-
compared it to other districts.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
it's a big difference.
What I'm saying is, before we start judging, understand it's a difficult test. However, I'm with you. Everybody has to take it in public school. So that there's no excuse.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right. And I just feel like, to me, we should be seeing them getting better and better the longer they're in our school. But you go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah, so this is just for this particular school year, starting this past testing time of spring of '22, and how the third and eighth graders did in ELA and math. So you have the same charts broken down for each subject area, but you can go back and choose different assessments and kind of see how our district did, and you can also look at other districts as well,
Or the state average.
or the state average.
Right.
Excuse me, just for point of clarification. Okay, so these tests are taken in the spring
Yes.
of the year.
And what's the date, Dr. McLeod, that they're gonna be taking it? We have a window, don't we?
Right, the windows in May.
The window's in May.
Okay, so this is at the end of the scholastic year, pretty much, where we should be rounding out our, getting ready for finals and all this, and these are our results.
Yes, last 20 days of school is testing.
So this is an excellent resource on the State Department's website, but that website will take you to some report cards as well as to the state's report of test scores for districts. I'll entertain any other questions.
Questions?
You want to look a little deeper?
It's like a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
First thing you know, when you're on there, you've lost 2 hours.
Yes. So all of this is public information, so you
It's all
don't have to have a
public.
password or anything, it's just available to anyone in any place that can access this information from the website.
But wouldn't you think this is good for the teachers or
Absolutely.
schools?
Absolutely.
Right.
We use this to inform our decisions, and so this is a huge piece of informing what we do in the school.
And what do parents receive, just for clarification, what does a parent receive when a child takes this test?
So each student will receive a score report, and so once we receive those, we'll send them, we usually send them with report cards, and parents will, and for some schools will talk to parents at parent conferences, but they usually get a copy of the individual student report that will give them customized information about their child and how their child did on the test. So it's usually like a 2-pager that kind of goes through how well the child performed on the test.
And how does the teacher get it?
So there's a company that does all of the scoring for us, and they produce these forms and send them to the district, we send them to the schools, and the schools, of course, send them to the teachers. So
So the teachers get their own copy, and of course, there's a copy that's placed in the student's permanent file as well.
And do some of the schools use data rooms? And, I mean, I don't know. I know many districts have data rooms and they,
We do have principals and schools that utilize that. They're all looking at data to inform decisions, but, you know, each campus chooses their own way of how they want to use the data. And some of it could be the data walls and data rooms.
I have one question. What the results that the teachers get, I know, of course, they're not going to go into test questions and all that, but does it come out with a report to say we recommend you into this certain part of the category of science? It could be marine biology. It could be more specific to try to harp on to help assist us to know what direction is it that we should go in.
It doesn't speak that specifically. Mostly for teachers, it's going to give them information that they would use to intervene or to plan for instruction. Because this is done in the spring of the year. A lot of them use it for when the students come back and they're planning for instruction during that first
So it
year.
really doesn't help us figure out kind of where to guide us at all. It's just basically where we're weak at. You see what I'm getting at? To help the teachers set up their agenda for the year.
Yes.
It does not give anything like that to help them out.
Not in that particular school year, because unless you're doing something over the summer, a lot of times they use that. But because testing is the last 20 days of the school year, once we get those results back, the school year's over. So it's more useful to use it to plan for.
That's what I'm saying. Is it guiding them to go into a certain category?
Yes, it shows the weaknesses in the specific strands,
Okay.
as well as areas that the students did very well. And we do use that to be able to guide our planning for the next year, look at whether it's the way the teacher was delivering certain pieces of the curriculum, or just whether the students were, just caught on to that particular part of the curriculum better. We look at the district level, we're always looking for the trends. Places where we see weaknesses, that's where we push in more resources and more training to address that. Fourth grade math, for example. That's an area that is a focus because there's a trend, and it's actually a statewide trend with the fourth grade mathematics that we need to focus more on
Gotcha.
that
That's-
instruction.
That's why I was looking for more of a planning. so
We
can
have also,
strengthen that.
we've also historically been kind of hit or miss with formative assessments. So formative assessments are tests that we take in between time to kind of gauge, how well kids are doing during the. And so just the other day, with this same group of folks you see sitting in here now, we talked about the fact that for 23, 24 and beyond, we want to implement formative assessments with fidelity throughout for grades 3 through 12. So teachers have a kind of a snapshot of what's going on. And we will ensure that they are available, and we're not vendor specific, just as long as the formative assessments are aligned with the standards and the objectives that we're supposed to be teaching. So it's not that we've not done it at all. We just want to do it across the board. That gives us a snapshot during the year instead of waiting until the end of the semester and or school year. They'll inform us on what we need to improve on. So we just last week, is that right, y'all? When we had that meeting.
So, and I just, this is more for the public too, is, you hear the rumor, you're just teaching the test. Is the
Sure.
common thing that you hear is you really can't do that per se, because it's not like you're saying, hey, we're going exactly, this is, was algebra 1 and we're gonna hit fractions, or whatever it is.
So the objective of formative assessments, and in my curriculum folks, we talk about the jargon that we use, but for the lack of a better expression, if we are completing a year-long project, and the goal is to get the project fully completed, formative assessments are designed to take snapshots along the way to see, if we're supposed to be halfway through the course and have learned half of the objectives, how close am I to that? And it also is supposed to give me an idea of what might need reteaching or so forth and so on. So it is not over testing, it is a diagnostic for us to then go back and make adjustments in teaching. Sometimes it informs remediation, sometimes it informs enrichment. Sometimes a teacher learns that I do this set of objectives very well. This set of objectives I may need to lean on my colleague because they're more versed in that area. And then what we like to do is share data not only within the school and within the individual grades, but also across grade levels to ensure, and across schools. So, you know, if I've got a teacher at one middle school who's knocking it out of the park, and we find that out because of the formative assessment, well then, you know, we inform that by having other teachers figure out what's going on, what's working well, and then duplicate it around. So formative assessments really just give us more information. It's kind of like getting an oil change every so often.
And that kind of leads me into, because especially, are we looking at other districts to see what they're doing better to bring back home?
Absolutely.
Can I get a collective answer to that in the back room? Did we talk about that the other day? Absolutely.
Okay, because that's very important.
Yes, sir.
That we need to start looking on the outside.
I am very competitive, Mr. Palumbo.
Okay.
May I say something? He asked if we're teaching to the test. And Dr. McLeod, we're teaching standards, aren't we?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now, I think we use that word so much, nobody knows anything about what it means. Could we go to third grade ELA standards? Right here. All of those scores for ELA come from test questions created by a company based on a standard. It's not just any question, it's based, and it has to be verified, and they look for bias. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. And they even they give some questions out that won't
They fail
count because
test.
they're being, to see if they're valid, the validity has to be there. So if we can find the standards, let's just go to third grade. Here we go. And ELA, and if we can, go to third grade. Oh, and by the way, that page is where you find all of your standards. If you want to know what they're teaching, click on that and you'll find that out.
And we just had the release of the new ELA standards.
So it's not 2015 anymore? We have
Ma'am.
brand new ones?
Hot
Oh,
off the
dear.
press.
I actually have them right here.
Oh, dear.
Hot
Are
off
they
the
that
press.
different?
They are.
Well, that's wonderful. All right, so these are the old ones, or,
These are
Sorry
the
to keep
20.
moving, Madam Vice
Right.
Chair.
so here they are. So test questions that you've just looked at, you know, the results are made based upon these standards. And so they'll develop a piece of writing or something and have choices for answers, and they have to, but it tells you which standard is being tested. So teachers, you know, will know.
So they should be looking at these standards for their lesson plan for the next year.
Yes. Is that correct, Doctor? See, that's
If
how
I
it
may,
works.
if I may.
Yes.
I wanted to ask this question for several minutes, and it goes straight to this. We have all these testing during the year. Twofold question, and I don't know if Dr. Wright, Dr. McLeod, whomever. Do we test, say I'm just gonna, for instance, third grade, we test at the beginning of the year, do we not? To see if we're at grade level where we should be entering the third grade.
And they're
Can we do
bringing their
that?
data from the second grade also.
Okay. What do we do when we have children who aren't starting where they need to start? This is an actual interactions I've had with some teachers. They receive, it's a third grade teacher, she gets a kid that's not at third grade starting level. And so she has kids that are ready, she has kids that aren't. What do we do? What does this, what's things do we have available to this teacher so that all the kids are getting where they need to be?
We have the resources available within the curriculum for those that are behind. We differentiate those that are on grade level, those that are above. You have resources for your ELs, MLs, multi-language students, as well as students with disabilities. So there's a variety of resources, and our first place is to try to catch them with that Tier 1 curriculum and the basic interventions in the classrooms. And some of the testing resources we use, such as the NWEA map, we'll even give the teacher. We usually do that after the 10th day of school so that the rosters are settled. And they have immediate turnaround, 24-hour turnaround, so they receive those results. MAP will even help with who should be grouped with who for specific skills. It also has a continuum within it that gives resources and strategies for teachers to use with those different groups. And then we do a lot of training on different types of grouping to differentiate, because there's times you need them on where they're actually working today. There's other times you need them in groups with interest, so that it's not always the exact same group, because you want the engagement piece also, because students will try to stretch themselves when you give them the opportunities. We've seen many times students that have a lower reading, but they really, really like, I'll give you the example of my son. He loved cars. I couldn't get him to read any picture book or chapter book, but if I gave him a book with cars, he would read. And a lot of those words were well beyond what his instructional level was at that time, but he was so interested that he looked for strategies and then came, to the teacher at the school. He'd come to us for assistance, and it really built his vocabulary. So we have to give them a variety of experiences, but we have more resources with our curriculum than most teachers could ever use. And that was one of the reasons I want to follow up, to be able to show you from the teacher perspective what's available. If there's ever a time there is a gap, then we're going to fill that gap. We're going to assist them in getting the resources and the materials that are necessary to fill any gap within the curriculum, because that's part of our responsibility. And we also make sure that it's vetted, that what we are using is not something, way out, that we have gone through the right book list and things like that to make sure that our teachers are protected within our curriculum also.
And are our teachers are being given opportunities for professional development? We have new ELA standards,
Yes, ma'am.
so we're going to give them what they need, right?
And we would certainly like the opportunity to share the professional development topics and the feedback that we receive from those, but that would, again, be additional times to talk.
Dr. McLeod, or staff, could you speak to us a bit about sustainable professional development in the content areas that's ongoing during the school year?
We actually have some information in that. Go back to where this is. I'll just start.
Yeah. Every year, my team, along with other leaders in the district, they look at the data, and we look at many data points. We don't just look at the summative data. We also look at other trends that we're seeing. And this year, my team came up with the focus of spark and ignite, engage, and one of my really creative team members actually came up with the little term, because based on the summative testing data, the discipline data, the attendance data, the input from the stakeholders when we went through the strategic planning process, classroom observations, and those types of things, the data clearly reviewed. It illustrated a need to re-engage everyone post-COVID. Unlike some districts, last year was still a COVID year for us. 2 weeks before the start of school, when it was time for teachers to return, is when Sumter had a huge spike. Teachers were having to be quarantined, large masses of students quarantined and isolated. So, and that went on until around Christmas time, when it finally started to come down. So that also interrupted a lot of instruction. When you have to be home 10 days, even though they'd get on their laptop, we've learned that's not the same as the face-to-face instruction they get in the classroom. So we saw the need to re-engage everyone. When we started with the administrative retreat in August, having these discussions, and we meet with our leaders every month with ongoing training that is data-driven, and have data discussions with the most current data that we have. But out of that came our theme, which was to spark ideas, ignite passion, and engage students and teachers and all of our faculty and staff. And what we did was focus on the learner-centric, and this is just an approach where it's taking multiple areas, different instructional strategies, academic support strategies, the learning needs of the students, also their interest, and all those things come together to prepare the students. So it's all about the students. And we used this information, we gathered the measurement of that through the Elliott observation tool. Now this is strictly observation tool. This is not evaluative of any way. We are looking through the lens of the child in the classroom. And we collect that data from the classroom to have coaching conversations with our coaches when we're training them, and with our teachers when we're working with them, and then with our administrators. And the tool is also going to be used, so we're ahead of the game as we go through our next accreditations cycle, which begins next year. That used to be advanced ed for some of you that have been with us previously, and now the company is called Cognient. But they determine our accreditation and look for our strengths and areas of weaknesses for growth so that we can be accredited, which is very important. So, so if you're interested in what the learner-centric classrooms or identified areas are, those are all of them there, and they're all important. The equitable, the high expectations, the supportive learning, the active learning, progress monitoring, feedback, well-managed classroom has to be well-managed for learning to occur, and the digital learning piece. But all of the data pointed to the active learning. Okay. And that's why the focus was on the active learning. And as I said, beginning from our very first administrators retreat, they're the first ones that come back and we start the training and the discussions with them, all the way through new teacher orientation, our regular teacher orientation, our monthly meetings, monthly professional development offerings. This is the focus. Everything is wrapped around the active learning, engaging the students.
Okay, so you're saying we do have sustainable professional development going on in all content areas throughout the year.
Yes, and
Okay.
we do the needs assessment. We do the full needs assessment at least once a year to get feedback. But we also, after every professional development session, we gather feedback from the participants. What, did they feel it was effective for their classroom? Can they implement it? Do they need more assistance? And, what other information or what other training do
Yeah.
they feel they need to be more successful in the implementation?
Okay, but now I'm speaking about professional development ongoing, not just at special times, but ongoing throughout the school year.
Right, and we have it embedded in the schools also.
Embedded into the school program.
And-
All right. Is your team, I guess the curriculum / instructional team, in the schools doing professional development?
Yes, sir.
And are they in all of the schools?
Yes, sir, they have rotations.
They rotate, okay. So they're not necessarily assigned schools, they go to all of the schools, all of them.
We have Ms. Carnes and Ms. Pate are the extra set of specialists, content specialists for ELA and math for elementary.
Okay.
And then you have Ms. Kempton, who's K-12 ELA and world languages. Ms. King is K-12 math and world languages. Mr. Phillips is K-12 science, social studies, PE, health, fine arts, STEM. So, and that's all of us. And Dr. Laws is CTE. So he
Okay.
does secondary, but this is all of us. So we are in the schools, but we're
And
rotating through multiple
and they're in all of the
areas.
schools? Okay, okay. All right. Any other questions?
I do have a question.
Yes.
And I was delighted to hear that the resources are there. The teachers have the resources for the classrooms to aid those students who need assistance in various curriculum areas as they further prepare for testing the ensuing year. My question is, we have all of these resources there. What are we hearing from the teachers? Do they feel that they have adequate time to actually plan out and individualize or customize these lessons? Because that truly can be a little bit challenging, and I imagine for new teachers it could be even more challenging. How are we addressing that? And I'm sure that your staff is probably helping with it, but I would love to hear
Absolutely.
from
They
you.
always feel that there's never enough time, which we do too. But we have a mentoring program for our new teachers and our new to us teachers, because even if you're a veteran from outside, systems are different. So we have a mentoring program and a teacher induction program to assist them with planning. And even though they may plan together, they still have to plan specifically for their group of children. And that's why the data component is always so important. We do have individuals who are resources within the schools. There are interventionists when students get to, are really struggling, they'll go through the MTSS process, which is the multi-tiered systems of supports, where they're looking at the attendance, the behavior, as well as the academic piece, trying to pinpoint what the deficiency is, so that they can better support it. And then we do have interventionists in the classrooms that are specific to usually the content area. And we have a variety of methods. Some push in to the actual classrooms, some pull out depending on the level of support that the student needs. So all students are a regular ed student first, but then as we add on supports, we're going to do what we do for any regular ed and then move the supports up. The last thing we want to do is the pull out. We want them to be a part of the cohort with their peers. So the pullout's never going to occur when the actual area that they're struggling in is ongoing with their class. So if math is their area of weakness, they're going to that math class and getting all those supports from the regular ed teacher. And either a interventionist is pushing in, depending on how many students and the way they can group them, or if they've gotten to a tier 3, which is only a few percent that need that much support, then they'll have an extra period to pull out to work on specific deficient skills.
What do you mean when you say push in specifically?
That means that the interventionist actually goes into the classroom with the regular teacher and they work together.
Tag team.
Yes, pretty much.
For everybody, would you explain interventionist?
Interventionist, that is someone that is skilled in that particular content area, that is an extra resource, and they carry a particular smaller load of students, and they work with kids that have specific deficiencies in certain skills within the classroom. And the goal of intervention is, let's get them in, help them fix that skill, whatever the deficiency is. It's intended to be short-term, so that if it's needed longer-term, it can be, but you really want to be that specific to take care of that skill, because usually it's an underlying skill, and once they get it, they're off to the races.
And are they usually a certified teacher?
Absolutely. Has to be certified,
Not
highly
just a-
highly
not just a
qualified
helper.
person. Mm-mm.
Right. And that person works closely with the teacher?
They plan together. Mhm.
So going back to my question earlier,
Mhm.
that would play into the 3rd grade. If the beginning of the year, you've got 5 kids that, or 6 kids or 10 that are not at entry-level 3rd grade, then you're gonna have an interventionist come in to help bring those kids along to where they're up to speed. Am I following this correctly?
They can when you go through the process, if you see that. It may be something that even though they're below, the classroom teacher is able to help fill those gaps. But it's when
Along the way.
along the way, yes. And we also have reading coaches in the elementary schools, and there are instructional coaches in some of the schools that also help provide support and strategies to work with small groups at a time so that you can address the individual skills without a pullout.
And I think this is an obvious question, obvious answer, but if you'll address it. Where does discipline, how does this fit into the teaching and learning?
Discipline?
Yes. If, without it, we have what?
Y-
A problem.
Yes. You've got to have,
Chaos.
yes.
So
There-
that needs to be a priority for us, doesn't it?
That's correct. You have to have a well-managed classroom.
And,
That doesn't mean silent,
right,
but a well-managed classroom, because you want students to be engaged in interacting with the teacher and their peers in a structured setting for students to really reap the most benefits and to move that needle.
Dr. McClung, what happens when, to the student, you have the interventionist to come in and help and do everything? We get the parents, we get it all involved. They're just not meeting standards. And the teacher, even the parent, believes this child should not move on and should stay behind for another year in that same grade to make sure they can meet the standards. What happens in that situation?
Well, if the student hadn't met grade level standards and the teacher recommends the student for retention, then that goes to the principal.
Okay.
But we have to ensure, though, that we have provided the appropriate interventions before we do that, because the research does state that every year a student is held back, they are much less likely to actually graduate high school. But we also have resources available, extended day, after-school tutoring, summer tutoring and summer enrichment, and summer school, actually, to assist.
My question on that, I can understand maybe later on in their career or in the education system, but especially specifically in the first, second, third, fourth grade. My question is, we're just moving them on, and hopefully they'll catch up. I just don't. I can't see how that is. That, especially when you have a parent that's involved, teachers involved, and they're recommending that this student should stay behind and to get additional time. And this is what I've heard in the past is they're getting, and all of a sudden the teacher comes back the next year and all of a sudden that student's moves on to the next grade. They're very concerned because that child was not ready at all. So it seems like we're setting them up for failure in that situation. And I'm just trying to figure out how some of these students are moving on and they're not prepared yet for, especially when it goes to later on in high school when they can't read and write. Can you tell me the incidences of that's going on, or what's, and that's what I've been told by teachers and parents. I'm just trying to see how they get to that point, how they're getting moved on.
I'd have to have specifics as far as that goes.
Okay, we're not moving them on just because we just want them to get to the next grade?
No.
Okay.
The decision, the ultimate decision to promote and or retain children, it rests with the principal of the school, has a right to grade and classify. However, we take all of that information into consideration. So hopefully we are, at the end of the school year when the parent conferences happen, if a child hadn't been successful, we hopefully have exhausted all of our interventions, including but not limited to summer school, after school, extended day, and so forth and so on. If the child is still not successful, then my expectation is that there's dialogue to determine whether or not the child is close enough to go to the next grade and we can intervene and catch up, or whether retention is an option. The advantage of retention is so that you can go back and retool and prepare the child. The disadvantage of retention is over time. There's statistical data that says that each time you retain a child, the likelihood of them graduating and being successful decreases. Particularly, there's some pretty strong data about one grade being salvageable, if you will. If a child is retained twice, there's some pretty extensive data about that. So principals are faced with that decision. Do I retain? How can I intervene? Or can we serve them in the next grade and get them caught up? I mean, that's the decision now. Do we get them all right? Absolutely not. Sometimes we, either way, we should and maybe don't. Sometimes we don't and maybe should. But it is absolutely an ongoing dilemma. And then certainly the last couple of years with COVID and its challenges, and I don't like to use the term learning loss, but learning was different during those 2 years for sure. We've got some unique challenges in terms of how to deal with and ensure that children have what they need and make those decisions about retention, intervention in the next grade, and things of that nature. So it's an ongoing process, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's when I see the scores and the percentages, as we're just moving on failure.
Sure,
You know?
sure, I got you.
And I think you gotta,
Yes, sir.
you gotta say, okay, this child, especially if they keep moving on, it's like, okay, this child's not gonna be ready or soon to be adult, be ready
Right.
for career ready or workforce ready. I think that's the biggest problem right now is going on, is we're seeing the test scores, we're seeing that, in the classroom, they're just not meeting the grade. So there's a breakdown there, and that's what we're trying to figure out.
And we're trying to stay away from social promotion, so that's really not what I'm talking about. But sometimes if a child, for instance, does really well with local standards, with the normal day-to-day grades, but has difficulty with testing, we have to make principals have to make decisions along with their staffs about does that warrant a full year back in the same grade, or can we fill in the gaps of the next grade? And so, and it's not an exact science. I mean, I wish there were a magic button that we could push to do that, but it's individual student based. It is, we have to look at the extent of the service that the child received in the grade. Did they have good, strong teachers all year? Was that teaching fragmented? So there are a lot of things that, and I'm not trying to defend one way or the other. I'm just trying to, there's a lot of things that go into truly assessing and making promotion and or retention decisions. It is, having served as a principal for 6 years in my career, it's one of the most difficult decisions that a principal makes, trying to figure out, because it is important, as you said, to make sure that we're not just passing kids along. Yes, sir. So,
If I may, and I understand that there are statistics that
yeah.
address the graduation rate with retention and whatnot, but I also, and this is probably going to be a question for Dr. McLeod. I speak from personal experience with my family. My brother was identified very early, and I believe it was the first or second grade, as having what was classified in the 60s as a learning disability, okay? And literally, we were told he would never graduate, okay? But we had good special ed teachers. The decision was made in the 3rd grade by all concerned that holding him in the 3rd grade another year would be beneficial. That decision was made again in the 8th grade for him and he had great special ed teachers. The question being, of course, that's different than an average child, but we have the mechanisms, I hope the answer is yes, early on for identifying why these children are behind, because it could be dyslexia. It could be a multitude of things on any number of spectrums that could be causing the issue, not just he's not paying attention.
That's correct.
So we do have these things in place very early.
Yes, we
Do
have
we not?
screeners. We have screeners in place for those very reasons.
Okay, and these children are redirected and placed into appropriate learning streams?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
So in the overall scheme, children who fall in that category, that's not really who we're talking about, but are they in these test results?
Yes, they are. They are.
Okay.
They have to be.
Yeah.
But is there a differentiation somewhere so that we could see?
Unfortunately not. No,
There's
ma'am.
not? Okay.
Every child shall succeed at, it gives no wiggle room. So one of the most important reasons that our children either succeed or not succeed is in the classroom. It's the teacher, right? So we do need to retain and recruit. Is that correct? Do we have situations when we have long-term subs?
Yes, ma'am. All the research states that the number one indicator of student success in a classroom is the classroom teacher. And we need classroom teachers that are dedicated to be in there with our students, teaching
The standards.
the standards. And we have had a large vacancy list for several years. And the substitutes, I appreciate them being there, trying to manage, and the school's trying to give them support, but they're not a certified classroom teacher that has gone to school to teach and has been supported throughout the years and have learned all these tools to put in their toolbox to assist these students.
And I know we don't make excuses. I'm not a person who says, we have this excuse, COVID, no. Everybody's under the same pressures. We're all looking for teachers, we're all saying COVID was a factor. But would you, in your professional opinion, and all of you who work in this, would you say that not having enough teachers could account for some of these scores?
Significantly.
Madam Vice Chair, if I might, I wrote something down because I didn't want to forget it.
Okay.
So I'm going to make this statement now. So we heard some conversation earlier about professional development and the need for such and the need for it to be ongoing. And absolutely 125% agree with that. Here's the challenge. In today's education system, public schools all across the United States, it's more adversely affected by rural districts like ours. You all do know that we're still rural, even though we're about half and half. Some people say depends on which day. But we're going to have to continue to monitor and reinvent professional development, and here's why. Most of the new people that we hire, whether they're coming straight out of college or second career or what have you, are no longer education majors. So the training for these people who are sociology majors, business administration major like I was, or what have you, that we're trying to convert into teachers, that professional development model and the way that we develop teachers is very different. Now, that's not an excuse, Madam Vice Chair. You said that earlier. I don't believe in excuses either. But it's our reality. And so this whole thing about facilitation of instruction, too, is different. Sit and get doesn't educate children nowadays. It used to, but it doesn't now. And so I want all of us to remember that this is a different environment and a different pool of teachers now that we're having to train. And again, that's not an excuse, it's our reality. And so professional development is going to have to continue to be developed, if that makes sense, because the way that we prepare teachers now is very different. That's why the interventionist model works. A lot of districts are going to advanced teacher role models where you have, for lack of a better expression, lead teachers who still have classroom loads but also lead other teachers. I've already talked to the staff about that, and don't need that printed in the item that we're going to go to advanced teacher roles tomorrow or anything, but models like that help this new breed of teachers that we're hiring to try to get them prepared and ready. We've got some amazing teachers in this district. We saw one last week, and I wish I had videoed the classroom. The best way, in my opinion, has always been, if you want to improve instruction, find somebody that's doing it well and use them as a model to make other folks better. We do that in industry, we do that in banking, and educators have to do a better job of that, particularly in the 21st century and beyond. So that's my statement, ladies and gentlemen of the board. That's the best way to fix instruction and improve it.
Would it be fair to say that the problem with finding or having certified teachers, people who actually go into education, they're studying it in college to be a teacher. The lack of that, would it be fair to say, is because they don't want to go into teaching because the environment is not what it used to be. And I mean overall, I don't mean in Sumter, I mean overall.
In my opinion, Ms. Smith, that is certainly part of it. The environment, the classroom environment is different. I won't use the word I normally use, but teaching is also less attractive. If we leave here and we go to a high school, we go to a university, and we ask children, young folks, what do you want to do with your career? We'd probably stay all day to get a handful of folks that say, I want to be a classroom teacher. Because the profession right now is not attractive to today's market. Part of that's pay, part of that's the environment, yes ma'am. But another part of it, in my opinion, that is very, very much overlooked is states continue to do things to discourage longevity in education. And here's what I mean. If a person is not an education major and they decide to go into the profession, they generally are going to have to go back to school and take 15 to 18 hours of credit, of course credit, that does not count towards a master's degree. It's just extra courses. They most likely are going to have to pay for it. And then at the end of that, we pay them around $40,000 a year. There are a lot of non-degree requiring jobs that make $40,000 a year. So it's really multifaceted, in my opinion. Yes, ma'am, the environment's part of it, but we got to pay them more. We have to create a better path to licensure, and then we've got to continue to professionally develop folks. I mean, all of that has to happen. It can't be just one or two of those things, in my opinion.
So, Dr. Wright, so the biggest thing, a lot of that, of course, we can lobby and up to state level.
Yes, sir.
So that's out of our control at that point. But the environment portion, we control that.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
we should be able to start putting our heads together and get that knocked out and
Yes.
start, and then making sure our principals and assistant principals are enforcing the standards to back up our teachers.
That's correct.
In the workforce environment to make sure they're safe. So that's one of the biggest things that we need to be looking at.
Yes, sir. And the environmental things are, if I may, they are everybody talks about improvement of discipline and things of that nature. When I talk about environment, I'm talking about teachers 20, 25 years ago, they had intermingling outlets, so if a teacher was struggling, they generally had a group, a study group, they get together and plan and so forth and so on. That doesn't happen quite as often now because
Could it?
Well, yes, ma'am. That's an environmental improvement that we're talking about that we want to work on.
Even along with the new principals and assistant principals,
Sure.
to see what's, have them come together as a team, that they should be doing professional development together. And of course, I could say, my biggest thing is, it's kind of, if we're all just sticking in the district, we're not looking at beyond who are actually doing it,
Right.
that are very successful in the state. They need to be up at some of these districts and sitting down and saying, to bring back to here. So that's the big thing I would love to start seeing,
Sir.
is teachers and principals and assistant principals to help out the environment on that.
Yes, sir.
I had a question that just came to my head a few minutes ago, sort of off this question, and I'm going to make a statement, and I think we're going to come to a close. Is it possible, Dr. McLeod, I don't know whether you ever thought about this before, maybe you have, because you're working with this all the time. Is it possible for a person, for a student, I'm going to the other side from what you talked about earlier, for a student to graduate valedictorian of the class and not pass the standardized test? Is it possible?
I would find that hard to see. Did they, no.
I won't look at it.
I wouldn't say it's 100% impossible, but that would be very hard for me to believe that would
be
happen.
impossible? Why do you think so?
Because to be an honor graduate, you have requirements that you have to have accomplished, and some of those include successful completion of AP, IB courses, dual enrollment courses. Those students aren't going to be in those level courses and to be an honors graduate and
Yeah.
therefore a Val or Sal without having that under their belt.
But what if they have absorbed everything that has been taught by their teachers, but none of it was aligned with state standards? So they made A's in their classes,
Correct.
but could not at all deal with the standardized test because they had never been prepped for it. That couldn't happen?
I hope not.
No,
Okay.
because, yeah.
I was-
That's why we have leadership teams at the school, instructional
Uh-huh.
leadership teams as well as us, to ensure that standards instruction is
Oh, I
occurring, those
understand-
indicators.
I understand exactly what you're saying. I understand that is the intent.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do have a teacher who does not teach the standards,
Mm-hmm.
or a group of teachers, or a principal who does not enforce the teaching of the standards, couldn't it happen that a child could go through all of a high school career and be a great student, but not be a scholarly person for a test?
Theoretically, it could occur.
Theoretically, I think so. So more important it is that every school be challenged to teach according to the standards and not according to the desires of the teacher or the lackadaisical attitude of the principal. That's the point I'm
That is
trying to
correct.
make. Yes.
Absolutely.
And then finally, I would say there are challenges. There are challenges, no question. We're probably at the most serious point in human history of challenges in the area of education. What I've discovered in life, that the greatest challenges also provides the greatest opportunities for creativity.
Yes.
And we must not be resigned because these times are tough. But we must be energetic and vigorous and inventive to create a new way of doing whatever it takes to ensure that education is still a vital part of the fabric of our society. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Reverend McCann, could we ask, did we have any answers on the national merit exam? How many students have we had receive that, or do we know? Maybe next time?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
check.
Okay. Thank you.
Vague memory, 2019, I know we had one in Sumter High, but I'll check and
I'd sure like to see
Yes.
that pushed a little bit more.
Well, and we have other, not just national merit, but, we used to have the Gates Millennium, and there's additional ones now also.
Is
and
that-
we can get that.
Is that the one that's in controversy? Is some other state that failed to?
I think it is, but we
Yeah,
used
okay.
to have a number of them. That's all
And
I-
they basically comes out, have they all been notified immediately?
Yeah. But we used to have
Okay.
a number of them.
Okay, just want to make sure because that has been a political, and we don't want to get involved into that,
Okay.
all that.
Okay, if that's all, let me take the opportunity to say to Dr. Wright and to the staff, all of you, thank you so very much for tonight's presentation. As a board, we shall look forward to other presentations on data and relating it to individual schools and getting a better fix on where we are from school to school. I think that's what I'd like to see us do next.
Okay.
This was a great start because we need to understand the process. And that's what we were saying. We need to understand the process. We are not as literate as you guys are, and we need all of the help we can get. And you've done that tonight, and I want to thank you. I want to acknowledge these gifts tonight to board members from the family out at Sumter High School, all right? And of course, we'll say more about how wonderful everyone has been to the board, even a brand-new board on next Monday night, okay? All right. I think that is it. If we don't have any objections, we'll bring this session to a close. I don't hear any. The meeting is declared closed. God bless you and have a good night. Thank you again.
Thank you for this.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
I think it brings a little more understanding of what we're doing.
That's what we want.